All right. So we got attendees coming in. I always feel like it's a little bit awkward as we get started because no one's saying anything. This is where we would really need to cue some music. All right.
No,
Kind of early for that, isn't it, Bert?
It's not a beer yet. I've got a high level of discipline. I do not drink on school nights before noon.
Is that date? Wouldn't that be school days before noon? All right, guys, so we can get started. We got about 13 attendees and we're gonna get a few more as we go. Everybody, as they come in, will be muted. So I am Anastasia, I'm the Managing Director of Shadow Labs here at Shadow Ventures. In case you don't know, we are a seed stage firm based in Atlanta, and our focus is investing in the AEC space. We got our founder, KP Reddy here, along with Marc Gorlin, who is the founder and CEO of Reddy, and then Bert Ellis, who is a well-known entrepreneur and early stage investor. And they're gonna be kind of talking to you guys about what happens during a downturn and how you can power through that. So before I hand it over, I'm just gonna give you guys a quick run through. So if you have questions, use the Q&A function. You should see it at the bottom of your screen, or you can throw it in the chat. Either myself or KP will make sure that your question gets answered. But other than that, I'm gonna hand it over to KP so he can get everybody warmed up and get the discussion going.
All right, thanks, Anastasia. So thanks y'all for joining. We've been doing a series of these webinars, I would say, highly focused on helping entrepreneurs. When we had the quarantine, it hit me that the large majority of our portfolio CEOs and incubator companies had not actually been through a down cycle. And I think it's better, instead of tips and tricks, really conversationally hearing from people that have survived. Bert and I had done a physical, like a in-person meeting, which is apparently not something we do right now, a couple of years ago, where we just talked about the .com boom and bust and how we survived that. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to chat with Marc and Bert around kind of thinking through adjustments. I don't think anyone knows what the new norm is. I think nobody really knows what that is, but I think from how do you make decisions around people? How should you be communicating to investors? I know personally, when my portfolio companies go dark during these times, it does not make me feel good. So investors do have feelings. We like to be over communicated to as well. So I thought it'd be good to have a conversation about these topics for all of y'all. So thank you, Marc and Bert, for joining. I know you guys, even though we're not all on planes, we're all, for some reason, even more busy than being on planes. So start with Marc. Can you give just a little bit of background on Reddy? I mean, you're more entrepreneur. I'm sure you make some investments here and there, but entrepreneurially focused. You're operating a startup in this environment, and a venture-funded startup. So give people a little bit of background on your business and kind of decisions you're making, how are you decisioning right now?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. My name's Marc, and Reddy is a crowdsourced delivery platform. So we use regular people in regular cars that help get stuff delivered. We do it for you and me, delivering something to our friends, small businesses, flower shops in town, but also big enterprise brands, like Home Depot, Walmart, Tractor Supply, Michael's, and more. When you order something online and somebody brings it to you at home same day or scheduled, odds are it's probably us. So we also deliver bags for like the airline. So when they mishandle your bags, we would bring them to you when that happens. And since it's kind of hard to lose 3 bags these days, and that was a decent part of our revenue, that was definitely an impact of what's going on right now. So we've wound up having to look at you know, that going down, but we're in good shape because all of retail has gone up. We are up multiple times where we were before, even with that loss. But you do sort of have to refocus everybody on what you're looking at. We saw demand come in crazy amounts from people like Home Depot and others over the course of this thing. It just grew every day to the point there is no business case to have your system ready to scale from one day to the next 30 times. And that is what we saw on a Monday, about 6 or 8 weeks ago. So the bad part of that is it falls over. The good part of that is if you've got partners that you can work with, you can actually take your systems 2 years in advance. And we did it inside of probably 10 to 12 days alongside of Depot and others that we were working with. So, I mean, my best advice of going through this right now, and all of them have sort of been different. Bert's been through the one in the .com one in the nice two at the end of the 90s, but we focus very much on the companies we have. How do you increase different products? You can do them. In our world, it's like not just car, but other modes that we can deliver for. So how can you do more stores and more geographies and more stuff that you're just delivering in your existings? And then how can you find desperate customers that need help that might not have been delivering and their businesses are shuttered and you can get them up quickly? You take Michael's, the craft store. You might not think about it, but during this, apparently people need their rainbow looms and their sidewalk chalk. I know Bert enjoys his body glitter as well. So we took them in literally a week and got the technology connected and started delivering for them in over 1,000 stores, which before now would be impossible, mainly because of bureaucracy and red tape. But this pandemic is somewhat one positive thing on like the business front. If you're a small company trying to work with a big, people are making decisions, they're hustling, they're moving faster. A lot of the bureaucracy and red tape and administrivia that stops you from being able to do stuff has not gone away, but it's gotten a lot easier when they see a big threat to their business, and all the BS roadblocks they usually throw up have not become so important.
Cool. Bert, what are you I know you have a lot of investments out there, and I'm sure not all of them are, that's a terrible mug, Mark.
What's that?
That's a terrible glass, pulling up a UGA cup in front of me. Bert, I'm sure, like Mark seems to have been a catalyst for his business. I'm sure your portfolio that maybe hopefully some of them this has been a catalyst for them and others are probably not so much. Like what are kind of the conversations you're having with your portfolio companies?
Well, regrettably, none of my portfolio of about 24 companies have found a ramp up, yet. I finance entrepreneurs, and I expect them all to look for opportunities, even when we're in such a horrible situation as we are right now. I'm old enough, which is why I'm here, I guess, to have been through the ramp up of the late 90s, which was the most aggressive, hang on for your dear life run up, that I've ever witnessed in any of my companies. The process of building IXL, we were hiring 200 people a week, and our hiring theory back then was don't let them leave the room, because if you let them go somewhere else, they got hired. And then, the bust of 2000, and then the 9/11, a year following that, and the shakeups that those entailed, and then 10 years later thereabouts, the downturn of 08, and now this one. This one, none of my worst case scenarios, even through any of those, none of my worst case scenarios ever replicate what we're doing now. And I had 4 companies that were in the process, one go public, right about now, and 3 more were in the process of being sold / monetized. All those things have gone by the by. One of my companies, had an auction run by an investment banker, and final bids were due March 15th. And bids were in a very, very, very stratospheric value, and that company provides payroll services to cruise ship employees. Oops. So that one, that whole thing went, by the by, and that, part of that is, the business is still there. It's going to come back. A lot of the employees are still on the cruise ships because they have to keep employees there to keep the boat running, even if they don't have clients, and if they send all their employees back to their country of origin, whether it be the Philippines or China or Mexico or Indonesia or where have you, they won't get them back, not in this world. So they don't want to send them home unless the ships never cruise again. We assembled our team on this, and we've all tried to figure out: are we in a V curve, a U curve, an L curve, or swoosh? We've decided in the cruise business we're in a deep V, and this thing is coming back. So we made our plan accordingly. And we've got all the companies went and applied for the PPP loans, and all my companies got them. So that is helpful in that we have businesses that have gone really down, but they're not out of business, and we think all the companies will reemerge. They will be probably significantly smaller, and the upside will be significantly smaller and pushed off farther. We just have to take that into account. But our if the restaurant's dealing with a PPP loan where you're trying to keep employees for 60 days and you're not even open. That's a much more difficult thing. I put together a couple of notes of things that that I would have learned from all these occasions, and now dealing. Of the 24 companies I'm involved in, I run one of them, and the rest of them I'm either a lead director, lead investor, or a director. So I don't make the final decisions. I influence them as an investor. But my thoughts kind of run down about 8 or 10 different points. And KP, if you're okay with me going, I'll keep on going.
For sure.
Mark and I talked a little bit about this morning, and and Mark, emphasize any of the points that that I would make. So when this kind of crap hits you, the first thing you got to do is recognize you got a problem. You can't ignore it. You can't put it out of sight, out of mind. It is right there. You got to recognize it. Then assemble your team and talk it through with the team. Make sure your whole senior team also understands that you've been dealt a new hand of cards. It's not very good and maybe awful. Today it's awful, but you all got to recognize it. And then create a plan. You got to create a new financial plan, and then you got to create a new strategic plan. You have to make a plan out of something. You got to have a plan that's very flexible, because right now, as I just example of the cruise ship business, are we a V, an L, U, swoosh, W? What is it? We think we're in a deep V, and we planned it on that basis. There's some rationale for that, but we made a plan. Now, we got a plan that takes into account any of the other things that may change, and we'll change it as soon as we have better data, but that's our plan. Then the thing that you as an entrepreneur have to do as the founder and the CEO is you got to take charge. You can't run a company as a democracy, particularly when you're in an environment like this. You got to make decisions. Great if you got the team on board with you, try and keep the team on board with you. But you got to make the decisions. You got to move fast. You got to move decisively. If that decision entails a significant significant cutbacks, you got to make a decision on that. But if you think it's going to take significant cutbacks, do it all at once. Get it over with, go deep, go down to the bone, whatever analogy you want, but get it done, get it over with in one fell swoop. Death by 1,000 cuts is the worst thing you can possibly do. Tell your employees you're going to do one cut, and then 2 weeks later you say, well, we're going to do one more cut. No, get it over with as best you can. Hiring back is a lot more fun than laying people off. So if you cut too deep and then you got to hire them back, that's a high class problem. Once you do that, move quickly, decisively, and then communicate. You know, as KP and Mark were saying, communicate to your employees, communicate to your, you know, to your senior staff, your colleagues, your shareholders, your directors, and your customers. But my advice is don't over communicate. You know, the daily COVID press releases that our president's doing, there's too much. There's not enough data. There's not enough new stuff. It just becomes boring. So once a week, probably all you need to do, but you do need to communicate. My personal advice is to also, as the CEO founder, is to lead by example. You know, and you know, if you can, when you're making these cuts, cut something of yourself, cut your own salary, cut back. And if you got a fancy car, put it in the garage, drive the junker, you know, and be visible. In this environment, you can't be visible by walking around, but you just, you know, whenever there's a Zoom, even if it's not particularly your function, you know, log on, say hi, thank you for everybody. You're definitely paying attention, then get out of the way. Be upbeat. As bad as this crap is, you got to act like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to get out of this stuff. I'm absolutely positive we're going to get out of this crap we're in right now. Do I know when? No. I think September. Okay, I picked a date. And then do what we're doing right now. Network with everybody you know. You know, learn everything you possibly can. Share war stories. You can't get people to tell you stuff if you don't tell them stuff. So you got to have it's got to be a two-way street. And finally, when you get through this, there will be no problem you can't handle. My thoughts for the day.
Awesome. It's funny, Bert, like you were talking about like talking to people. I've been helping out this G20 incubator program. And I told the team, like, the people that you always wanted to get a hold of and engage with, they're actually more accessible right now than ever before because they're not on planes, they're not at conferences. And they took that advice and they're like, yeah, it's amazing. All these people we're trying to collaborate with, get information from, they're more than happy to get on a 15-minute call and share what's going on. And I think everybody's just looking for, whether it's data, they're just looking for insight. So Mark, how have you, when Bert talks about the communication aspect, has that been tough considering some of your employees are, I guess we lost Mark. Hopefully he'll dial back in. Okay, we lost Mark.
Wi-Fi blink.
Yeah. Which is interesting. We're also all taxing our home infrastructure in terms of Wi-Fi and all. But what if you look at, you know, post 9/11, I think is the closest. You know, we've never done none of us have lived through a pandemic, but I feel like 9/11 is as close to in terms of the suddenness and quickly trying to make decisions that were not based on any, you know, the .com. A lot of people could look at it and say, oh, well, you know, it was a boom or bust economy and it was kind of driven by the tech companies and the money, et cetera. But 9/11 was kind of not anyone's fault, so to speak, and we all just made adjustments, and pandemic feels very similar. Is there any, I mean, some of the advice you gave applies absolutely to post 9/11. Is there anything net new? Because I feel like entrepreneurs are dealing with a lot of personal stuff right now too, whether it's having young ones at home. 9/11, I think if you were in Manhattan, you were still you were dealing with a lot more, but sitting in Atlanta, you know, we were more aware, but our personal lives were a lot less impacted in terms of, you know, my kids home from college, all of a sudden, like everybody had like a personal impact. Have you been trying to like help kind of at that human level at all with any of your CEOs, or are you leaving space for those conversations, or, cause it's just hard, right? I mean, you can leave.
Everything merges right now. You can't, in this environment, you can't separate the personal from the business. You can't say leave the family life at home, because you're at home with the family life. So that has to be factored in. I've had innumerable Zooms where a naked kid has walked into the picture, or the dog barked, or the Wi-Fi blinked, or somebody forgot that they were on a video and walked by a little less dressed than they would have been. And you just have to laugh that off, because that's part of what we have to deal with. I think as we do this more, people will learn to do their Zooms with the right background. You shouldn't be Zooming with a pile of dirty laundry in the background or what have you. But not everybody's got that opportunity at their home when they got 4 kids at home. And you just have to be sympathetic to that as part of managing.
How do so much of investing in companies is meeting the entrepreneur, okay, cool business, you get a deck and you're like, okay, that's an interesting idea. The numbers make sense. Let me spend time with the entrepreneur. And to your point, you invest in entrepreneurs, right? You kind of differentiate. You didn't say I invest in companies, you said I invest in entrepreneurs. Do you think, like, if you had to make an investment today and you never could actually meet face to face with the entrepreneur, what would it take for you to be comfortable without meeting them? Or is that just, hey, I can't imagine investing in an entrepreneur that I've never actually physically met?
Just did one last week.
Okay.
I just invested in a company in San Diego where I have not met the entrepreneurs face to face except by Zoom.
Okay.
And I am comfortable that I can discern enough about a person's personality from a video call, that I don't need to fly all the way to San Diego and have the 2-hour meeting and the 4-hour dinner and go play golf before I can figure out whether I trust the guy.
Yeah. So do you think quote unquote, when things are back to normal, do you think you'll go back to having to meet, or were you going to say, look, I'm happy being in Hilton Head and I don't need to jump on as many planes, and it worked during the difficult times? Why, or do you think you're going to go back to still having to meet with people, or do you think you're going to leave space for being able to do more deals from the comfort of your home?
I think there's been a permanent change. For sales calls, jumping on a plane to fly halfway across the country to make a cold call on somebody because you need to do it face to face, and then do the dinner and the hotel and blah, 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 done, gone, not going to happen. Those jump on a plane calls are going to be the exception rather than the norm. Board meetings, I don't think board meetings will be in person. I've been doing 1 or 2 board meetings a day, and the technology we're using here, it's working just fine. And it saves a lot of money for the company, saves a lot of time for the board members, so you can get a lot more stuff done. So I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think, I think work from home is here to stay. I think people do want an office because people want, get cabin fever, and they want to get back and socialize. It'll be different. I don't think we're going to be permanently in a world where there's little dots on the floor 6 feet apart, and you got to walk from dot to dot. I think that's here for another few months, and then we'll get over that. But the need to travel, for me, I do not need to go travel to meet the entrepreneur to make a decision. Other VCs, investors have a different point of view. Do I want to, would I like to go kick the tires and see the facility and see the laboratory or whatever? Yeah. But if I can't, that doesn't stop me from doing it.
So Mark, we've been talking about you. So
I'm glad. I thought Bert's list was so good. I thought I was done for the day, and my internet was like, you don't even need to talk. So it just shut me off.
So what I was asking was, Bert mentioned like communicating. You have your core employees that are part of your team, and then you have these gig workers, right? Yeah. How has that communication been, both with your own team as well as this extended part of your team? I mean, they're essentially part of your team. They're just not.
Yeah, I mean, the drivers, I mean, there's a lot more to communicate with them that does change week to week, because you've got certain places that have requirements for masks, as an example, and certain locales. I mean, the requirements sort of change all over the country, and we deliver to 90% of the US households. So we're kind of everywhere. So we've put things in the app to let people know what's going on. I mean, the thing is, you can't let the world stop either. We've been changing our payments infrastructure that we've just upgraded. We've went to a guaranteed tip with Walmart gigs, which will save us some money. But all the stuff you're trying to communicate in light of you doing your regular business, in spite of the fact that everything's a little weird out there. The good thing on our side is that they've got a lot more gigs, so a lot more things to do for them as drivers, tends to make them okay with anything else you're doing. Or sort of a corollary my dad used to say is great margins can often make up for bad management. So that's good. Internally, just a lot more communication. I mean, we've upped the number of meetings between our, core strategy team, which is our executive team, every week, and they've been doing the same with their folks. But it's not just that. I mean, your core folks, beyond the meetings you have during the week, call them on a Saturday, see how they're doing personally. This is not just a business problem. This is also a stuck at home problem. All these people, within your crew, their worlds have changed somewhat. And you know it because you feel it from time to time too, maybe not as much, or maybe just the same as others. But validating it's okay to feel like that. And then, we're all going to get through this together. There is Bert's comment about being upbeat and being a cheerleader is there. I'm fortunate. One of my mentors in town is Frank Blake, who was chairman and CEO of Home Depot, and he and I talk every week. But one piece of advice he gave me is you need to have your kind of Henry V speech. And who could do it better than Shakespeare? But you need to, and it's true. These types of if you haven't, just look up the Henry V speech, you'll see it. But these types of moments sort of stamp the soul in a company, getting through a really hard time to get past it. And you need to tell them they're important about it, and all the pain in the ass and them trying to do Zoom calls with the dog running into it, and all the scars on their arms that they have right now. People in 5 years are going to want them to roll up their sleeves and show them those scars and tell them the story of it. Much more so than me starting the company. I mean, they are writing the book and the chapters of what Reddy becomes and what it is. And you need to let them know that. And then you need to empower them to do things. We had one situation, I alluded to it earlier, when we were up like 3,000% in a day, and the system fell over. We got it back up and running, got everything delivered, but it was an issue of like a Home Depot wasn't delivering on Sunday. We since fixed that, and they were, but every preceding Monday, all the orders from Sunday built up. So it was just crushing everything on Monday. So we're on a Friday afternoon, and normally I don't talk to the entire dev team, but we called together a meeting. And I like the analogies, but I don't know if anybody saw Apollo 13, but you need to have that sort of Apollo 13 moment. I'm like, guys, we only have the tech we have. You can upgrade the databases, you can upgrade the people, spend what you need to spend, don't care. But we've got to figure out how to not screw this up on Monday. I don't care what we do. And much like that Apollo 13, you just dump whatever you have in your company on the table. So you got hoses and duct tape and filters and we had, and that's what we did. And then we made a decision on Saturday to take all the gigs in the system and push them all at one time to redline the system, see how far we could go and do it to ourselves first. So when we got to Monday, we'd be prepared for that and could actively try it. I've become not a huge believer in testing systems where you're not testing it in production, because I don't think it works very well, because you just don't know all the things in there. So we were testing stuff in production. We were trying to make our own system fail on a Saturday, so we didn't fall down on a Monday. But like I said before, in 12 days, we got better about it. But you do need to keep that up. Trying to think through some of the stuff that Bert said, but yeah, we found that the team, it's kind of weird. We're all apart, but we're working together. We're working more as one. And I think people pay more attention. I mean, we do town halls every week, every week or every other week now. And I feel like people are paying more attention to it. We show the product demos after town halls, so everybody knows what's changing in the product in there. But it's interesting. And these types of times downturns can be great times to start companies. In the VC world, sometimes it's the worst time to raise a fund, but the best time to invest it. But like with, I co-founded a company in town called Cabbage, and we started that during the midst of the worst downturn in 20 years or more, in 2009. And, we're trying to say, okay, the financial system is falling apart, but we're going to go and give loans to people who sell crap on eBay. So we probably could have done a better job coming up with how that was presented. But if you think about it, it's this moment in time where everything else is crashing down around you. If anybody saw the movie Forrest Gump, there's that scene in there where Lieutenant Dan and Forrest are out in the ocean, and Lieutenant Dan's yelling at God, and all hell's breaking loose. Storm's coming in, and the next scene, they're quietly floating back into the harbor. And in the harbor, all the other shrimping boats, one's wrecked on the bottom of the bay, and one's wrecked up on the shore. And they hadn't been able to catch any shrimp, but now all the other boats were gone, and they were pulling in all the shrimp. Financial services was like that when Cabbage came on the scene. Advanta, the largest small business credit card, went out of business. CIT Bank went into bankruptcy and was the largest lender for small business loans. So that sort of clearing is the deck. They were on the bottom of the bay, and they were wrecked up on the shore. So these can be great times to innovate in your business and start things as well.
Yeah, it's funny. We're actually wrapping up our fundraise for our third fund in March with the deadline of May. And all last year, we made no investments. We made 0 investments after our first close, and I was getting criticized a lot, like, why aren't you making investments? And I was just struggling with some of the valuations. And so now all of a sudden our LPs have all jumped in saying, okay, so you have no trailing obligations. You're going to have 50 million of fresh dry powder. This is when things get going, right? This is when people start the companies, and the capital efficiency, you can hire people without signing bonuses. Like, all of these things kind of come into play where you can just accelerate product build. How are you seeing anything?
That was probably a hard decision. That was probably a hard decision for you, getting that pressure to not everybody that raises a fund, then they want to go fund it. I mean, that's one of the lonely things about doing this right now is you're going to have ideas, and you got to make decisions like Bert says. And it gets easier to do, but it can be somewhat lonely, because if it needs to happen, you need to do it, and you need to take it. I like everybody's opinions in it, but then you've got to decide. My dad always said a benevolent dictator is often one of the better forms of government.
You'd have your dad on the call next time.
He's amazing.
Getting by LPs for not deploying capital, like, hey, you're just being too picky. I'm like, I can be stubborn and all that, but hey. So I think, one of the stats that we keep getting pretty consistently is unemployment numbers, and that's all great data, and we get that. It's hopefully fairly reliable. Underemployment's a whole nother weird thing. We don't really, it's hard to get some stats around that. Are you seeing any patterning with your gig workers that you have an opinion on, like, how, are you getting any data around underemployment? Is there a surge of people trying to generate other income?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing, taking all journalism maxim, the coronavirus shows no fear or favor. It's indiscriminate. It doesn't care how much money you make. Whether you're a busboy, whether you're a bartender, whether you're a knee surgeon or a heart surgeon, you've been generally out of work for the past 8 weeks. All sorts of disruptions in these jobs. We've seen over 30,000 new drivers come onto the platform in the past 4 weeks, nearly 1,300 just in Georgia. And it's sort of strange things happening. Hospitals never been fuller, but the revenues are way down because they're not doing regular procedures that actually makes their money. We deliver for pharmacy. Pharmacy is remarkably down because all those elective procedures haven't been done. And so there's just less trailing prescriptions than after people have had whatever the procedure is that would be written out there. So we've seen that drop by a margin. You've got, if it tells you how bad the airline thing is, yesterday, if you combine Southwest Airlines and Alaska Airlines gigs of bags being delivered across the country, they were less than piece of cake on Collier Road.
Wow.
So there's some pretty interesting things. One, and then I'll stop. One thing I found, Peggy Noonan writes in the Journal, and early on she writes in this, and everybody noticed, was fascinated that like liquor stores remained open. And she wrote something along the lines of, because there isn't a politician in the country stupid enough to prohibit alcohol during this sort of crisis, because they realize that on no level has a nation ever survived when they close both their churches and their liquor stores at the same time.
That's good. Bert, what do you have any opinions on kind of this underemployment? I mean, I think the other thing is, for folks that maybe are tuning in that are looking for a job, got laid off, or trying to augment, do you have any thoughts around kind of the underemployment data that we can't really track well, and how that might be shifting about how we think about hiring and that kind of thing? I mean, because you made the point, cut deep, cut clearly. A lot of companies, I was talking to a large firm the other day, they let go of 20% of their staff, but then they made the remaining staff take a 20% pay cut, which is, that's tough. I don't think people have 20% left to still pay their bills.
It's not affecting how I make my decisions, the whole macro, issues, but I think we are totally overreacting, to this pandemic at the expense of queering our entire economy. And I think that, what the measures we're taking are not justified. So I disagree with closing down the economy. I don't understand how, we can do what we're doing to prevent, 100,000 deaths from COVID, and we have 500,000 people a year die of smoking, and we sell cigarettes. So that's just a personal opinion, but it doesn't affect anything we're doing on the companies. I think a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. I think a lot of restaurants aren't going to reopen. I think a lot of retail stores aren't going to reopen. I think a lot of service employees are not going to, get rehired. And I think that's tragic. And I think we should do something different as a nation. But how does it affect what we're deciding? No, you have to make a decision on each company.
Yeah.
And most of my companies have not had, not laid off anybody yet. A little bit because of the triple P, money to allow us to push that off and see if the deep V comes quicker. Some of it because, we just weren't all that staffed up. We're using contractors less versus, using our employees less. So we've laid off remarkably few people, but so far.
So there's a question saying, going back to the Apollo 13 example, what approaches have you seen work best when you have resources at capacity but need to quickly hack a new revenue stream? So I think we've seen that with some of our portfolio where they now see this new revenue stream, but they're already strapped for resources. How are you kind of, Bert, or any of your companies coming to you and saying, hey, our core business is struggling, but we want to pivot a little bit and go after this new thing that's emerging? Or are they trying to all stay? Have you seen them mostly stay the course, or is there kind of a shift in how
they're all doing that? They're all doing that. I expect them all to do it. Back to entrepreneurs. The joke is you don't have to outrun the bear. You have to outrun the other guy. So our hopes for almost all of our companies that the competitor, whether it be the bigger competitor, or one of several others, smaller, whatever, that they die first, or as Patton said, the object of war is not to die for your country, make the other guy die for his country. So if the other company dies, you pick up their business. And I expect our entrepreneurs to look through this and find another opportunity lurking about. Now, if we need more capital, this is a tougher time to raise capital. In most cases where we need more capital to do exactly what you just talked about, for two of my companies, we're going to pass the hat internally.
Mm-hmm.
And probably do it at the last round of, and no step up in value. And always when you're raising capital, if you do a flat round or if you do a down round, does that queer subsequent rounds? I don't think that applies anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to penalize you for recapitalizing the company internally on a down round to get through the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
my theory. We'll see what happens in a year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a number of good examples, even just within Atlanta, of this. I mean, you look at what Cabbage did in terms of it's hard to put out loans when all these businesses are going out of business. So this technology platform that we built was able to pivot and put out $3.5 billion worth of PPP loans to the smallest businesses, over 110,000 of them. Which solved the same problem that Cabbage solved up front, which is like banks weren't paying attention to small business. We saw that happen in the first round of the PPP, where the banks were taking care of all their big clients and the small ones were being left behind. If you didn't have an existing relationship, you sort of got left in a lurch. That's a good example. Smaller examples: Bell Street Burrito, simple restaurant in town. Like within a week of it, I got an email. They're like, okay, if you order over $20 worth of food, we're gonna give you a free roll of toilet paper. And I'm like, I will never see a marketing email like this again, probably in my life. But then they took what they had. They took their bag of tubes and hoses and duct tape. They're like, we get food coming in. So they opened a market. So all of a sudden you can get a sack of flour, a bag of onions, a burrito, and some toilet paper at what was otherwise a restaurant. They scrapped it together and figured it out. There's a restaurant near the old Fulton County Stadium in Summerhill called Little Bear. And the chef was about to open just in time for the pandemic. And it hit in worst time ever to want to open a restaurant, but made a creative adjustment to sell prefix dinners and different cuisine theme every week and cocktail spritz kits that go with it. So like you got to look at the resources that you have and adjust. And I mean, what you were saying, Bert, about competitors, one of our bigger competitors, named To Live on the West Coast, heralded, raised more money than us. They sold their technology to Target last week or week before last. And, but because I've maintained a very friendly relationship with their CEO, everybody else is calling, trying to get it. And they're referring every single bit of their business to us. So be kind too.
Yeah, that's a good, we have a lot of quotables off of this, a lot of movie references. Clearly, Mark, we have to have your dad on at some point.
I don't know what the hell he's going to say these days, but yeah, he definitely has some great stories.
Yeah. So is there such a thing as kind of long-term planning right now? Or is it, any given Sunday, Al Pacino says the 6 inches in front of your nose? Is that where we're all playing right now? Or are we putting any effort towards thinking about next year or any kind of long-term objectives?
Yeah.
Bert, you want me to go? Okay.
All my companies, we're still doing long-term plans. It's got to be a flexible long-term plan, but every one of them's got to make a decision on, when we start to come out of this and whether we come fully out of it or, back to 80% or back to 60% or what have you. And yes, you have to have a long-term plan.
Yeah, we have our long-term plans that were in place, but I think the way we look at it is the revenue expectations are, the basket's just way different. I mean, so much of our revenue was around the airlines that is no longer there. Is that going to take longer to snap back while this other stuff is it going to start a gradual decline as people start coming out of their houses? We don't know. So figuring out what it's going to be in 3 different scenarios, sort of high, medium, low, looking out 6 months at a time is what we're doing. I mean, our product roadmap, by and large hasn't changed, other than the fact I have reprioritized to the top anything that is going to make us more money or save money, like directly and quickly, not way far in the future. And it's just it is difficult to plan too much right now, because you don't know. You know we're going to come out of it. You just don't sort of know the when. And companies that have limited amounts of money, you know, you got to figure out how are you going to do that. That's why what Bert was saying, if you have to cut hard and cut soon. It's true. You can bring people back. Nobody likes a bunch of Band-Aids being taken off. But I think you just got to look inside your own business and figure out, like, how long do you have? What if things go, you know, so well, and cut percentages off of that, and then plan to that. And if it's better than that, then you'll be better off than you thought you were.
You got to plan for cash. I mean, my one adage, you know, is, I mean, there's no problem you can't solve, you know, with hard work and honesty, unless you run out of cash. So you got to plan for that.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, a lot of we have a pretty large segment of LPs that have invested with us that are really large corporates. And I've been on the phone a ton with a lot of large corporates that, you know, when times were good, they were saying things like innovation, incubation, like investing in fund, like all these things that they were doing, that now all of a sudden they've come to me. And I saw this in the last cycle where, hey, we invested in this idea, this product internally. It's hard to justify, keep moving with it. Do you want to buy it from us? Do you want to, like, I've had some large companies come to me and say, hey, do you want to take over our LP positions in other funds? Because we just can't, we're laying off people on the right side. How do we justify making LP commitments in a fund while we're laying people off? So as an entrepreneur, like to Bert's point, like you invest in entrepreneurs, are y'all seeing any, because we're seeing a lot of that where the corporates are just pulling back. You know, Mark, I mean, for you, Delta Airlines, I'm sure there was or any of the airlines, they had a lot of innovation initiatives being driven. Clearly, that's probably not a huge area of focus of spend and attention right now. Do you see any kind of opportunities? Go ahead.
No, please go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
No, I was like, do you see opportunities? I mean, as an entrepreneur, like we're always going to be looking out, right? Not everything has to be our idea. It could be, hey, Mark, we're building this thing. It's a half-baked cake. Do you want it? Or can we just take this entire department and give it to you, right? Because we don't want to be in that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say cakes, because nothing but cakes, piece of cake. Cake has become our world in Reddy, because people love themselves some cake during a pandemic. No, with Delta, yeah, we've looked at some very VIP sort of baggage things we were going to do that obviously nobody cares about right now, with the revenue down 90-95%. However, the product we put together with them on cargo, it was nascent and we were building up, figuring out a way to utilize the first and last mile of Reddy along with the line haul and getting stuff from place to place, is something we're leaning in with there and exploring how to get, you know, utilize those planes that are flying to, you know, have a product that could get for customers across the country same day and get it delivered. So yeah, we're definitely leaning in. I mean, we're talking to those folks all the time, but you know, you got to understand when some of your customers have bigger fish to fry than you, and lean into the ones where you can help. Anybody that's in retail, that's doing pharmacy, that's doing cleaning, that's doing grocery. I mean, those are the Home Depots, the Walmarts, all the PBM providers we do delivery for. You lean in and figure out how do you expand more there and go into new product sets there, and then how do you support people that, you know, have problems bigger than your own right now.
Yeah, I've kind of told a lot of our startups, all those prospects you've been talking to for the last 2 years that said, you know, we're just going to do it ourselves. We're not going to partner with you. We just want to do it ourselves. And it's not their core business. Like, you should call them all back and see how that's going, right? Because there could be they went down the road, like in your world, a lot of these retailers maybe said, oh, we're going to set up our own delivery service. We're not going to partner with you. Those all become prospects right now because people tighten up on core focus a little bit.
Right now is actually a remarkable time to get people on the phone. I mean, I've had like the chief customer officer at Michael's like reached out and we wound up talking on Saturday afternoon. I was on a walk. I mean, who otherwise I would have spent like 4, weeks and weeks on end talking to the wrong people to get there. But like, now is a time, if you got something that people want, you can get in touch with them. I would say way more easier. They're way more at home. They're way more available. There's no commute times. The days are longer. It's like Groundhog Day. So people are generally more available. If you come in with something that can be helpful to them and a kind note, you probably will get further with it right now than you would otherwise.
Yeah.
Ditto for me on that. I found getting people on the phone or a Zoom is very easy. They appreciate if you cut to the chase. And, so you don't have to do all the preamble. But it's a good time. I don't think the corporate VCs are going to be a good place to go to get money right now, but there's a lot of people that, have followed Buffett's adage of this is a good time to invest in downtime. So this is a good time to invest. I think it's a good time to invest. The doorbell that just rang was delivering, 2 big boxes of food products from a food company I'm looking at buying right now because they finally, after many, many, many years of talking to them, have said, well, maybe this is a good time to sell.
All right. So any parting from the folks listening, if you have any last minute questions, we've only got a few minutes left. Any kind of parting thoughts, Bert?
We will get through this, stay upbeat, and keep at it.
All right.
Go talk to your teams. Tell them they're awesome. Tell them how important they are at getting through this. Empower them to make decisions and make sure they're doing that with the rest of their folks. I mean, it is your crew that's going to get you through it.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks y'all for joining us. So this all got recorded. It'll be available later on our website. This also goes into our podcast format. We're finding like these conversations translate pretty well into podcast format since nobody's really presenting slides. And since we're all doing a lot more walks these days, it's out there on the podcast. So thank you all a lot, and hopefully we'll get together soon. Hopefully September, according to Bert. But thanks y'all again.
Thank you very much. Good seeing you guys.
Tropical storm Arthur is about to attack us right here. So I'm probably going to lose my Wi-Fi in a minute anyhow. All right, everybody have a great day.
Take care, everybody.
See you.
All right.